Since 2020, firearms have been the #1 cause of death among children and teens in the United States, according to the CDC.
And the Midlands is not immune to this growing epidemic. Law enforcement says there is a rise in youth gun violence, and it's tearing families and communities apart.
So we brought together local leaders to discuss this issue and how to ensure that our children have a future. Dr. Philip Prest, a trauma surgeon with Prisma Health, Anthony Williams, a behavior interventionist and founder of the nonprofit, the Youth Advocates, Columbia City Councilman Tyler Bailey, who is proposing a summer curfew for teens, Sheriff Leon Lott with the Richland County Sheriff's Department, and Bishop Eric Davis with Word of God Church and Ministries.
Each is deeply rooted in the community, and they're working towards stopping the violence and saving this generation.
So we are having a tough conversation about a problem that impacts us all, and we'll also discuss ways we can do our part to save our kids. This is something that impacts us all professionally. It impacts us personally. What has been the biggest challenge for you in dealing with the rise of gun violence that we have seen, especially among our youth?
It's kids with guns that doesn't have a conscience now and doesn't care about life and don't realize the consequences of their actions. They settle everything with a gun, and they feel like this gun gives them power and gives them respect, and it doesn't. It gets them in jail or gets them in the cemetery. And we're not teaching them life skills. We're not teaching them that. They're not getting it from the home. If they don't get it from the home, then it's up to the village, and all of us sitting here today is part of that village, and we've got to fill that gap on teaching these young kids what life is really about, and that's frustrating. It's frustrating when you hear a 12-year-old who's walking around here with a gun and is shooting people, or 11-year-old who's a victim of a gunshot. That's something this community has never had to deal with before.
I think that idealistically it affects us all, but realistically it doesn't. I think that the reality is it's the whole George Carlin, not in my backyard kind of approach. As long as it doesn't directly affect me, I'm not really that vested in it, not that interested. And I think the problem really is that we're going to have to, as a community, realize that if it affects one of us, it affects all of us. And I think that that's the real issue. We're going to have to collaboratively work together to stop a problem that may be segmented to parts of the community, but it still affects the entire community.
Yeah, for me, it's the shooting after shooting and the aftermath of that. It's the moms after the funerals are over who are still hurting and feel like that void can never be filled. And demographically, you have majority of the shootings, especially here in Columbia, young African American teenagers and men. Bright futures that are taken too soon. And I'm sure Bishop Davis can speak to this as well, as just going to these funerals and seeing them. Seeing the moms, seeing the brothers and the sisters and the friends, and then moving on from it, where some people have apathy, they moved on, but the void from the people who love those who were killed, it exists forever.
I've been to many funerals as a youth advocate. What I do, I think it's real deeper than a lot of things we're saying. I really think it's the fact that if we want to talk about African American kids, our kids, they don't have knowledge of self. They don't know who they are. They don't have a sense of their history or anything. Those are the things, just basic foundations like that. And I believe that's what's causing the problem with not having the emotional skills and social skills, because they don't have knowledge of who they are. They're just walking around trying to figure out who they are. So by figuring out who I am, I just do things, right? So, and the reason why I say that, yesterday I did a Get It Out session, right? And we talked about self-regulation and self-control. We talked about that yesterday. At the beginning, we did an actual film, 3-minute film on W.B. Du Bois. I do that all the time. Nobody knew who that was. Why am I saying that? Because if you know that you come from greatness or excellence, you probably gonna do positive things. You see what I'm saying? I come from a background, my dad, where he told me who I was. He taught me to be positive. He taught me that I was great. He taught me that I was a good person, come from great people. So gangs did not bother me. I didn't want to be like everybody else because I had a great self-esteem and great confidence. And I think once we build self-knowledge in these kids, help them with social and emotional skills, and let them know that they are important and tell them every day, They will change. I think that is the biggest problem. I think we kind of working with on top what's going on. We need to go deeper. I'm quite sure you probably understand that as a doctor. We need to go deeper than what we see. It's bigger than what we see. They need to know who they are, what they come from, and we as a community need to teach them that. Parents first, but we as a community need to teach them that.
As a society, we are so incredibly desensitized to violence. You know, if it's because, like Sheriff Lott said about, we think it's a status symbol or we see it everywhere, it becomes normal. When I talk to patients' families after a tragedy, the initial reaction is not the type of shock that I would expect it to be. When I tell someone your loved one, your child, your husband, your wife has been shot, the initial expression is acceptance. That happens. That's a thing. Guns are everywhere. So what? It's not until the reality sets in. It's not until there's a debilitating injury or a death in a funeral to plan or the coroner's on the way. That's when there's a change. But it's obviously too late. We've allowed, as a culture, as a society, to get to the point where the violence is okay, or it's at least so prevalent that we don't think about it in the way that we should be thinking about it. And then we have to cross that line. And when we cross that line, and when we all have been in these situations where there's an irreversible tragedy, that is the point where the reality hits in a way that no one is prepared for.